Take charge of your leadership development. Join our How to Take the Lead Substack community for bonus materials, exclusive content, and discussions that will challenge and change the way you lead. Visit howtotakethelead.com to find out more.
It's not butterflies in your stomach's dropped out of your backside.
Welcome to the danger zone.
You're listening to How to Take the Lead with Lee Griffith
and Carrie Ann Wade,
two corporate colleagues turned business besties who question everything we've ever learned about leadership.
What started with us putting the world to rights over a gin after work is now a weekly show challenging the myths and perceptions and exploring what leadership looks like in the modern day.
We'll also be sharing our experiences and stories along the way.
You can find our show notes at howtotakethelead.com.
Hit subscribe to receive new episodes every Thursday.
Plus, we'd love for you to rate or leave a review of the show.
And please share your thoughts and stories on the topics we cover using the hashtag HowToTakeTheLead.
Welcome everyone to episode 5 of How to Take the Lead, and we are going to be talking all about stepping outside of your comfort zone. And I can see Lee's face already with the I've got to be honest, Lee, I think we've been doing quite a lot of stepping outside of our own comfort zones over the last year or so.
Yeah, I think we've written a book on it practically.
That'd be next on the list, book to come. We just thought it would be interesting to explore the subject of your comfort zone or having a comfort zone and kind of what that means for you as a leader, how you might want to step out of it. And I thought it would just be helpful for us to clarify, I guess, really, what we mean by comfort zone. So for me, I'm not talking about getting out of my elasticated waist trousers because I'm actually going into the office rather than having a online meeting, although recently that has felt like having to step outside of my comfort zone. But it's more for me about the level at which you operate in your kind of leadership life in the workplace that feels maybe a bit more familiar and feels like it comes easy to you. So I'm not sure what your views are on kind of what is a comfort zone, Lee.
Yeah, easy is one of those feelings that you get when you're in your comfort zone. It is that sense of you just feel comfortable, safe. It's the routine stuff that you do. And there's almost that security of thinking, well, things will always be all right because it's tried and tested if I keep things as they are. So I think it's an interesting discussion today. And I think it's also important to early on to note that it's not just about physical actions of stuff. It can be the way that you might think about something or what you say to someone. It could be the difference between not saying anything to showing your vulnerability, which we spoke about in the last episode. So
absolutely, a good reminder, I think, Lee, about it isn't just your elasticated waist trousers and all the physical stuff. It is also about mindset, isn't it? And kind of maybe your approach to things that may or may not keep you in your comfort zone. And I guess for some people, being in their comfort zone is not always a bad thing. It might feel like a place, as you say, where they are safe and secure. But I think the discussion in this episode might take us to a few different places where we perhaps have a different perspective, I guess, on whether or not you should step outside of your comfort zone. And I think before I start to ask you a bit more to explore kind of the signs of when you might be outside of your comfort zone, I guess I felt the need to say that sometimes you might be forced, I guess, to step outside of your comfort zone as a leader in the workplace. And other times you might choose to take that step outside of your comfort zone. And they probably come from two very different mindsets, which probably worth us bearing in mind as we're having these discussions in this episode, Lee. So,
do you know what's really interesting though? You that concept of are you being forced or are you choosing? And I think that often can come from the point of how subjective a comfort zone is to someone. So we all find comfort in different things. And as leaders, we can't assume what the zones of comfort are. And maybe when we're being forced into things that we don't feel comfortable with, could be because the person who's asking us feels totally comfortable with that and haven't put themselves in your shoes.
Oh, I already feel like we're going to go so many different places in this conversation because kind of as you're saying that as well, I guess that subjectivity is a really important point to note, isn't it? Because actually what might for you feel like you're in your comfort zone might feel totally out of someone else's comfort zone if you ask them to do the same thing. And also, I guess, you might perceive that somebody is operating in their comfort zone and they might not be at all. They might be really having to go that extra mile to force themselves to work in a certain way or deliver on something, but they might just be making it look from the outside like it is super easy and that they are totally in their comfort zone. So I think we're going to explore quite a lot, I think, in this conversation. And I guess I wanted to start, and I don't know why I've picked this as an area to start in, but because we talked a bit about comfort zones, but I guess maybe I could throw a bit of a curveball in, Lee, because you might not be ready for me to ask you this question. But do you know what your comfort zone is? Are you aware of it when are you aware when you're operating totally within your comfort zone? And have you got examples of when you are?
So I would say 80% of my week when I was starting my business was out of my comfort zone. It was completely brand new to me. And doing this podcast is well out of our comfort zones when we started it. When we did the Insta Lives, that was something we'd never considered doing before. So I think that for me, I have awareness of when I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. There's 3 zones that you're in. So you have your comfort zone, you have your stretch zone, and then you have the danger zone. And the stretch zone is where you're learning, and it's where you feel the most rewarded. It's when you perhaps get excited and you get those butterflies in your stomach. So that's when you're feeling like you're stretching yourself. Comfort's when you're feeling safe and secure, and you perhaps might even feel a little bit fatigued, or you just feel like you're on a bit of a treadmill because you could be a bit bored, and all of those kinds of emotions.
Sometimes when comfort zone hits, there's also a bit of feeling of it's like a bit lazy.
Yeah,
I know that sounds terrible, but it's like, I'm having a bit of a lazy day because I'm totally in my comfort zone. I'm not having to think about this. I'm just almost on autopilot because I'm safe in the knowledge that I just know what I'm doing. So yeah.
And then you've got that danger zone, which is like the fear zone, where you are, it's not butterflies in your stomach's dropped out of your backside, and you
and as you're saying that, I've got welcome to the danger zone in my head as well. So I'm like, this conversation's already taken us in a place I was not expecting, with now my turn to do bad singing and your stomach dropping out of your bottom.
But it's that sense of that fear where you might not even be able to concentrate because you're so distracted by the thought of whatever it is that you're being pushed to. People can go, who are really in their danger zone, might be getting palpitations, might feel like they're having a panic attack. So there are physical symptoms almost of how you might feel dependent on what zone you're in.
Absolutely. And just as you're talking, I'm also thinking how much you're prepared to stay in your comfort zone or stretch yourself out of it can be impacted by so many things, like how you're feeling that day. Like you say, whether you're just a bit tired and you've got low energy, that's probably not the day to be stretching yourself. That's probably the day when you're gonna want to stick in your comfort zone.
Can I just slightly disagree with you though? Because I agree to the sense that you will know when is a good time to stretch yourself or to push yourself, and when it's a good time to stay in your comfort zone. But sometimes, like before we came on to do our podcast recording today, I was in such a low energy place. I could have easily just called you and said, do you know what, can we rearrange this for tomorrow? And I could go and get a bag of crisps, a cup of tea, and sat and watched some trashy TV. I could easily have done that because that would have brought me comfort at that moment in time because my energy was feeling so low. And this is a stretch out of my comfort zone for me to be doing the podcast. But I'm, just talking to you before we hit record energized me already. And it was the right call to just push through and do it.
Absolutely. And I think that links to a question we'll come to a bit later on, because there is still something I want to ask you before we get to it, but about the sort of importance of stepping outside of your comfort zone. And I think you're right. It's very easy if you're in a certain frame of mind, if you're in a certain place in your career sometimes, to just go, I want to stick in my comfort zone because that's what gives me that safety and security, and I'm not going to stretch myself. And I think we will start to talk about why it might be important to do the opposite and to stretch yourself for sure. But I guess to start with, and you've touched on this a little bit, I think, already, in terms of kind of physical reactions and how you're you might feel. But what for you do you think are the signs, not you personally, but sort of well, you personally, if you'd like to share them, Lee, but like, what are the signs as a leader that you might be stepping outside of your natural comfort zone?
I think the signs of it is something that you probably have to give a little bit more thought to than you would normally. It's probably something where you feel, I'm learning something new. I don't have that knowledge and experience. And I do think learning is probably one of the most obvious things when you start to step outside of your comfort zone, regardless of what it is. I'm not necessarily talking about educational textbook learning. It could be you've learned something new about yourself, or you've learnt a new skill, or you've learnt about somebody else that you work with. So there's all kinds of questions that could be answered if you start to step outside of your comfort zone. If you stay in your comfort zone, you don't learn and nothing changes, but in effect everything changes because everyone else around you will be stretching themselves, will be growing, will be learning, and they'll start to overtake you, and you'll lose your relevancy and your currency.
Absolutely. And your point about growth, I think, is a good one, Lee, because for me, it feels like if you feel like you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, you will feel like you're growing, you'll feel like you're expanding your knowledge, expanding your skill set, expanding your experience. And actually that might feel uncomfortable for you to begin with. It might always feel uncomfortable, but like you say, that's a kind of sign that you are actually pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone, that there is that bit of discomfort, maybe some nervousness, maybe some sort of butterflies, anticipation that you're doing something that you're not used to doing, and that you're potentially not sure what the outcome of that will be because it is outside of what would naturally be your comfort zone. So I think we've started to touch on this already in our conversation in this episode, Lee, and I guess I just want to delve into it a bit deeper in terms of when you're in a leadership position, why really is it important that you do step outside of your comfort zone? And you've mentioned what happens already, I think, if you don't, around people sort of overtaking you and other people's growth rates being much broader and much quicker than yours. So do you want to elaborate a bit more on that and like talk to us about why it's important to take those steps outside of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point I made about you going backwards almost if you don't challenge yourself and stretch yourself, but also I think, again, and it touches on what we spoke about in the last episode around that need to be conscious of the standard you're setting for other people. So if you're not growing and challenging yourself as a leader, then what's the lesson that you're sharing and showing to your team, and what are they going to take from that? And I suppose even more importantly, you are potentially holding back the progress of your team or your organisation, depending on your seniority in post. And that's when real damage and disruption can happen. So there's an actual serious consequence of you sitting in your comfort zone. Now, that doesn't mean 100% of your time you need to be in a stretch zone. But if you spend predominantly all your time, to the majority of your time, in your comfort zone, it can have really serious ramifications. If you think about companies who've been complacent with their performance or resistance to change, what happens to them? They become irrelevant, they potentially fold, other competitors take over, it could be performance slips and errors happen and people come to harm, depending on what the organisation is. So I think it can be, we joke about almost being, comfy pants and all of that, but it can be a really serious thing for a leader if they don't step out of their comfort zone.
I think the point you've made about the impacts on the wider team or organisation is probably the crucial bit there, because I guess, it could be your personal choice about whether you as an individual want to step outside of your comfort zone or not, or if you're going to resist that. But actually, if you are in a role as a leader, you have an obligation to role model that good practice to the rest of your organisation or your team, as you say, dependent on your seniority. And I think if your team is constantly operating in a place where it is comfort zone only, then you're not creating that culture of learning, that culture of improvement that's really important, as you say, to progress. If that's, that might be to be more innovative, that might be to improve performance. But if if as the leader of that team, you're just very happy to sit in your comfort zone and let everyone else do the same, that makes it quite difficult, I think, for other people to potentially raise some challenge and to want to stretch themselves and stretch the team, because you're not creating a culture where that's the norm. So actually, potentially as well, for me, I feel like there are ramifications around sort of the retention of really good people, because actually I think in my own personal experience, when I've recruited into teams and worked with different teams, really good people who are motivated, who want to excel, want to achieve, are people who do want to stretch themselves outside of their comfort zones. And if they don't get that opportunity within your team or your organisation, they will look for that somewhere else, because that is what motivates them and kind of keeps them going. So I think you're right in terms of those wider impacts on more people than just yourself, in terms of not stepping out of that comfort zone.
Are you a new, established or aspiring CEO looking to maximise your impact in the workplace? At Sunday Skies, I help you get clear on your big vision, create a strategy that connects, and the communication plan to deliver it. No matter where you are in your CEO journey, through my unique blend of coaching and done-with-you consulting, I will give you the strategy, support and space to succeed in post. Visit sundayskies.com to find out more and sign up for my email to receive intelligence and information that will challenge and change the way you lead.
If you're enjoying this episode of How to Take the Lead, please hit subscribe, and why not leave a review or rating. We'd also love to hear your stories and thoughts on today's topic. Please DM us, our links are in the show notes, or tag us into your socials using the hashtag How to Take the Lead.
I got an email this morning I subscribe to Rachel Botsom's email list, and I've mentioned her before as someone that I've really valued the insights that she gives on thinking differently about stuff. And she completely coincidentally sent an email about comfort this morning, and her discussion point was around organisations try to make people feel comfortable at work, but if you do that, or if you focus on that too much, actually what you're doing is limiting diversity of thought, constructive challenge. People stop taking risks in an organisation, so it can actually really reduce trust in the workplace. And I thought that was such an interesting insight that I hadn't really considered in that context before.
We talk a lot about that trust, don't we, in various other conversations that we have about leadership. So the more we're talking about this, the more that I'm getting the sense that stretching yourself as a leader and stepping out of your comfort zone has so many implications for lots of different areas of you as a leader, your team and your organisation, probably more so than I'd perhaps first thought when we started to have this conversation, Lee. So that is brilliant. I guess that takes me on to, we're talking about wanting to sort of stretch yourself, but how can you proactively seek out those opportunities to move out of your comfort zone as a leader? And I guess for me, it's like, what sort of opportunities might they be? And I've got a few examples of my own, and definitely this collaboration and the How to Take the Lead stuff is massively one of them, because I never thought 12 months ago that we'd be sat here recording podcasts together talking about this very topic, if I'm honest with you, Lee. And like you say, it hasn't just been sort of technical skills that has kind of stretched me, and mostly you, because you are the techie guru behind this podcast, stretched me on. It's just been that putting yourself out there as a leader, sharing your thinking, putting it out there in the public domain for other people to kind of have a view on, can feel like a stretch and feel a bit scary, but I'm ever so glad that we've been doing it, to be honest with you. And I don't know if you've got some of your own examples. I know you've given some already, but then we can move on to the how people can seek these opportunities out.
One thing I would want to reflect on, and I'll come to an example for me. If I think to the question around how do you start to seek opportunities outside of your comfort zone, I actually go back to, there's a bit of self-reflection that you need to do, and it can be looking at perhaps your language. So if you're using words or phrases like I can't, or I'm not very good at, these are with my coaching hat on, these are your limiting beliefs that are keeping you in your comfort zone. So being able to recognise when you are saying that to yourself and to others is really important. It might be things that you recognise that you're always avoiding doing. So are you avoiding speaking at a meeting, or if you get asked to present, are you passing the buck along to someone else or whatever? Are you trying to find workarounds because you don't feel comfortable? They're all really good signs that you perhaps need to be doing something different to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And I think that absolutely it is scary stepping outside of your comfort zone. We've talked about nervousness and excitement and butterflies and stuff, but sometimes it can still be and feel really scary. And what I would always say is try and break that down into manageable chunks. And if I think of an example for me, I don't like presenting. Now, my self-talk was always, I'm not good at presenting, but actually I just like to avoid it because I didn't like doing it. And I had to break that down into lots of small, manageable, bite-sized chunks that took me on a journey before I presented. And for me, it was a bit like, I don't know if you ever watched Charlie Brown, really modern reference there, but Lionel's Blanket. But I would have to, there were things that I would need to do around my preparation, walking through every step, considering the questions that might come up, knowing what areas I'm going to cover, all of those types of things to get me in a place of comfort to present.
I'd like to say I'm with you on that one, but my natural comfort zone when it comes to things like presenting is basically to wing it. And if I'm terrible the other way, if I feel too over prepared, then I go to pieces, and I know that it just won't come out how I want it to come out. But I don't know if that's true or if that's just me creating an excuse for doing everything at the last minute, Lee.
There is a really good book, I don't know if you've read it, The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes, you know, the lady who wrote Grey's Anatomy and Scandal and all of that. It's basically her true life story of how she recognised and got told that she was turning down lots of opportunities that were open to her, and then she decided that she was going to have a year where she just said yes to everything that came her way. And I found that so inspirational, and it actually bolstered me to want to say yes to more things.
And I think there's confidence sometimes that can be gained from seeing other people do that and seeking out those opportunities and stepping into a space that they're not used to. And not at all in the same way, I'm not saying I was a Shonda at all, but the year I separated from my ex-husband, I decided I was going to spend a year saying yes to more opportunities. So not just work-wise, but it was brilliant because I found myself doing things that I would have never, doing things like going out on a canal boat in Birmingham, listening to a poetry evening and getting dressed up in 1920s clothes to do it and stuff like that. It was just a real confidence boost, to be honest with you. But you almost need to see other people doing it sometimes for you to realise it's perhaps not quite as scary and fearful as you think it might be.
So Shonda's book idea was stolen from you?
Well, but I'd like to say yes, but absolutely not. And I'm sure the opportunities that came Shonda's way were very different to the ones that came my way. But I have to say, it was very empowering to say yes to more things that my natural response might have been a no to. And I got to meet some brilliant people, both work-wise and outside of work, and do some amazing things. And I'm not sure why I limited it to a year. Maybe I just need to get back in that zone of say yes more.
Yeah, you and me both.
So we have talked about how it feels to step outside of your comfort zone, why it's important for you to do that as a leader, and kind of how you can look for opportunities to do that. And I liked what you talked about around stretch, Lee. So I guess we're at that point in the episode where we share some how-tos. So Lee, what would your how-tos be in terms of how to step outside of your comfort zone as a leader?
I think mine would be, if I've got three. So my first one would be that honesty with yourself about how much you're actually operating in your comfort zone. My second one would be around that stretch. So a good marker is what's 10 to 15% stretch outside your comfort zone. What does that look like? That's usually pretty manageable and quite risk-free. And if there is a downside to it, it's likely not to cause any huge impact. Yeah. So, but the plus side is if it all goes well, then you can take another 10-15% step, and so that's a nice way to start to ease yourself into your stretch zone. And then my third point would be, I think this is one of those areas that working with a coach is really, really helpful, and I know I've benefited in my corporate career discussing exactly this thing with my coach. It is all about how you empower people to stretch themselves. So if you haven't got a coach, I strongly, not just because I am one, you don't need to come to me. This isn't a plug.
Other coaches are available.
But having that professional person that can ask you questions that make you think differently is really important.
I'm going to build on that top tip to sort of add to it a little bit from my point of view. I think there is something about if you're able to have that reflection time and have those conversations and seek out people to kind of challenge some of your thinking around that, I think it's really important to work out where you might want that stretch to come. I sometimes think, it's important to think about where are you going to have most impact stepping outside of your comfort zone, and potentially not just doing it for doing its sake. That's that bit that you mentioned about risk and mitigating that risk. Really be thoughtful about actually what's the benefit to you as a leader in your organisation in terms of where you stretch and how you kind of direct that stretch. And then there's definitely a bit for me that you mentioned that I think is a good top tip and how to is just remembering your role as a leader within your wider teams and how you demonstrate that actually it is a good thing to step outside of your comfort zone, so that you actually start to create a culture, let's call it a stretch culture. That might be what it's referred to in what you were talking about, Lee, but how you start to then create that stretch culture within your own team and your own organisation. So some top tips for people to think about in terms of comfort zone. I would definitely be really interested to hear from listeners about how they are stepping outside of their comfort zones and what that feels like. So do get in touch with us across the socials or DM us, leave us some comments. That would be great. As always, Lee, thank you. And thank you for being somebody who pushes me outside of my comfort zone and gives me those nudges to stretch myself. It is genuinely much appreciated.
Well, it's right back at you. You definitely pushed me outside mine as well. I wouldn't be sat here.
So here we are in our stretch zone. I don't think we've quite reached the danger zone with this one yet, Lee. Let's say we're still in our stretch zone with this one. I hope that's provided some food for thought for people, and I'm looking forward to our next episode. Thanks again for listening to today's episode.
Don't forget to hit subscribe so you're the first to receive new episodes when they drop every Thursday.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you would rate it or leave a review.
And let us know your thoughts and own experiences.
Get in touch with either of us on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram.
Or use the hashtag #HowToTakeTheLead.
Until next week, get out there and take the lead.